Welcome back to the latest installment of All Things EarthCache, still the only channel to focus solely on EarthCaches. The dual goal here remains the same, to explore locations that contain EarthCaches and to pass along some EarthCaching tips and tricks along the way. If you like that kind of stuff, well, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for further content. So this video is going to be a little bit weird. You can watch it by itself, but it will make way more sense if you've watched the EarthCaching Writing 101 videos. The goal of those videos was to take you from I can't or I don't know how to do it to I got my first EarthCache published. This video ties into those first three directly. I'm going to show you how I created one of my latest EarthCaches. Now, I understand that folks learn in a variety of different ways. So personally, I'm better at experiential learning. While the first three videos formally take you through the steps, this video puts those steps into action, from how I generated the idea all the way through to publication. What we're going to discuss is Alhambra Rock, GC AV8M5, which is a 1.5/1 cache. The geological feature known as Alhambra Rock is in southeastern Utah, near the Arizona border. Ground zero, though, is located at Gooseneck State Park, a couple miles away. For reference, Gooseneck State Park is north of Monument Valley and along the San Juan River. Alhambra Rock itself is an igneous intrusion within the surrounding sedimentary rock. So I think EarthCaches should answer the question, why is this like that? So why is an igneous intrusion within an area dominated by sedimentary rock? That's the lesson. Full disclosure, this is a vacation cache and my first time writing one of those. Now, all of the normal rules apply for publishing an EarthCache, still apply for a vacation cache, but you're supposed to submit it within 2 months of visiting the location. Now, I live a good 1,500 miles away, so if there's something I forgot or need to do on site, I'm not really getting a second chance at this. This is not my first time in southeastern Utah, though. I visited the area about 2 years ago with my father, and I joined my parents on another road trip to the area this summer. This was my first time to Gooseneck State Park, though, because I had recently been to Monument Valley and Valley of the Gods to the north, and knowing that there are no EarthCaches in either location, I had some ideas for possible EarthCaches and planned on taking notes. I did not prepare for anything at Gooseneck, but as I looked around and found the EarthCache and the virtual already on site, I thought, why isn't there one on Alhambra Rock? So let's stop and go back to the second class video. I talked about there's basically 2 ways to generate an EarthCache idea. One of which is you start with a location of a feature or process and then do the research. I typically gravitate towards this method, and that's exactly what I've done here. I'm on site, I see something, but I don't know much about it. But because I'm not prepared for this one, I'm sort of doing this one on the fly. Okay, so there I am at Gooseneck. The good idea fairy has hit me, so now I've got to go to work. So what do I do? Well, really, I suppose I'm just doing the same things I would do if I was creating an EarthCache closer to home. I took multiple photos. Again, who knows if I'm ever going to come back out here. So taking photos is pretty important. I also shot an azimuth from ground zero out to Alhambra Rock, but it's not really necessary as I can really kind of figure this out with Google Earth when I get home. I also determined what the lat long for ground zero was, but again, I don't really need to do this. I can pull up Google Earth again and determine that. One key thing I did, and I can't stress this enough for a vacation cache, I wrote down my initial thoughts for logging tasks. Again, I won't have a second chance at this, so I took a few minutes to think through what can my fellow cachers observe and analyze on this feature. When I thought about it later on, I really do that each time I'm preparing to build an EarthCache. While I'm on site, I tend to think through, okay, what will work, and I start jotting down some notes. I indicated in the class that tasks seem to be the biggest publication hurdle. It makes sense then to, while at ground zero, gather your thoughts and think about what a cacher will observe and what they can analyze. Now, when I write an EarthCache and I'm working on the tasks, I typically only develop 1 to 2 good observation and analysis tasks, but that's all I need. Finally, on my way out from the park, I stopped by and I spoke with someone to get the park manager's contact information. Now, it turns out I could have figured this out at home, but I didn't know this at the time. You're going to need permission, of course. So, whenever you can, it's best to talk to someone in person, then probably the phone next, and then use email as a last resort. I didn't expect to see the park manager that day, but you never know. He might have actually been there. So, when I returned home after the road trip, I knew my next step would be to reach out to the manager. I talked about this in the videos as well. To avoid some massive frustration, before you start putting in all sorts of time to research and write everything up, you've got to get your permission first. So let's go back to the manager. Initially, I tried to call and it took a little bit. And finally, I was able to figure out that the best way to contact him was actually by email. So, okay, fine, great. I sent him that email. Now, the Utah State Park system is very receptive to geocaching, which I think helps. I don't have to work through the how familiar are you with the geocache or with geocaching stage. Unfortunately, I found this part of the process happens more often than not. Anyway, so I asked, hey, is there an application or other process in place to receive approval? Again, you never know. And that's actually how it works out here in Alabama with their state park system. I did in my email provide him a quick review on EarthCaches, right? It's an educational lesson focused on geology, but with no physical component. Having no physical component makes it more palatable for the state parks, I think. So I like to remind them of that. Now, he responded back, Alhambra Rock is on tribal land and not within the state park, which I was aware of. But I know the guidelines, and I'm pretty sure that what I'm proposing will get approved. Smart me might have reached out to the reviewer beforehand just in case, but I'm pretty confident. So I let him know it doesn't have to be. I can observe Alhambra Rock from the park, and that's what is important. I simply tell the geocacher, you're going to need a pair of binos or a camera with a zoom feature. I was able to see everything and determine what I was going to observe and analyze with my phone with no problem. So I figured geocachers probably wouldn't have that. And after all of that, he sends me an email giving me permission. You're seeing just a snippet of that email that he sent, but that's it. That's all I need. That's all the reviewer needs. With that email, I can tell the reviewer I received permission on this date from Chris, the park manager, and he can be reached at either this phone number or this email address. Again, the clock is still ticking, and if you're having difficulty finding or getting a hold of whoever has the authority to grant you permission, or maybe it takes them time because they have to go up to somebody higher on the food chain to get permission, I would simply let the reviewer know. I found that they are typically super easy to work with. So I've got my permission. Now I can get into the research portion of the process. My traditional research sources have failed me here. And this I'm talking about the variety of books that I typically use to give me either general information on a process or a feature. Alhambra Rock is going to be way too specific and perhaps small to be mentioned in my books. What was somewhat surprising was that I couldn't find it in more of my specific books, or what was provided, like in Roadside Geology of Utah, was minor. So I turned to the internet. And even there, my go-to website, Wikipedia, failed me. Now, do I like to use Wikipedia for research? I do. I like the fact that often it includes additional resources for me to go check out. Eventually, I finally found two websites, one of which provided me some pretty good information. And at the end of the day, I basically have a single book giving me a little bit of information and a single website. But is that enough? Final result, I was able to develop two solitary paragraphs. Now, there was enough meat for me to get my lesson across, right? There was enough information, but it felt kind of weird. I've written a number of Earth caches at this point, and I think that there were some pretty solid lessons. Two paragraphs didn't feel like enough for me, but I had just returned from another road trip that included Shenandoah National Park. There are multiple Earth caches that are very well written out there that are just a handful of paragraphs in length. So at this point, I'm confident that the lesson I've written will still pass muster, but I have some kind of internal churn, if you will, because this isn't how I typically operate and write an EarthCache. So I turned to my logging requirements. Again, my photos and initial thoughts and notes were really key at this stage. In hindsight, I can recommend that no one should create an EarthCache or a vacation cache until you have some experience writing Earth caches, maybe closer to home. I have a pretty good feel for what works and what doesn't, but this is based on my track record of getting Earth caches published with somewhat minimal kickback from the reviewer. So that experience was able to guide me here with this Earth cache as well. And for this one, I spent some time on the task phrasing. Wanted them to be clear, and I had some ideas on what would work, but I knew the phrasing would be key. Nobody likes to go to an Earth cache with poorly written tasks. Now, if you've seen the 101 videos for tasks, I generally like to do 2 based on the description and what I contain, the geological lesson that I provide in the lesson, 2 based on observation and analysis at ground zero, and then a photo. Despite having only 2 paragraphs, I was nearly able to achieve that. More importantly, though, the tasks were clear, they supported the lesson, they required observation and analysis of Alhambra Rock and the surrounding landscape. For admin notes, I like adding them so you know what to expect at ground zero. So I pulled together some info on the park as well. I did a final review of everything, and then I sent it all up for publication. And to my surprise, 12 hours later, I got a new Earth cache published. Now, I got to stop and say 12 hours is certainly not the norm, but the reviewer that handles that part of the country, he typically takes care of business in a very timely manner. It probably helps, of course, that again, I've got a pretty solid lesson and I have some pretty solid tasks, right? I'm there to try to make his job easier to get him to yes in a more time efficient and a quick manner, if at all possible. So I did touch on this in the videos. These guys, right, these reviewers, they're all volunteers. So give them time. Again, 12 hours is not the norm. You should expect probably upwards of about a week. And I'm not sure how other reviewers operate as well. I've really only dealt with the one that covers the kind of the Southwest and the Southeast. So now let's go full circle and tie the creation of this cache back to the classes. In the class, I said that I tend to gravitate towards finding a location and then doing the research. And here's basically an example of that. The topic, very acceptable. In fact, it hits the 3 wickets that you can see. Does the lesson go deep in any of these 3 areas? Okay, not necessarily, but that's okay. Is it a super lengthy lesson? No, but that's okay. Permission. Okay, had a great topic and location, but can I get permission? Again, the Utah State Park system is very geocache friendly. I just had to locate and contact the park manager and let him know what I wanted to do. Logging tasks. Again, I tend to be formulaic. I like to typically have 2 based on the description and what's contained, the lesson contained in the description. And with this case, with only 2 paragraphs to go off of, I elected to go with 1 task. I also have 2 tasks that require a geocacher to observe and provide some analysis. In this case, I could still achieve 2 good, well-written tasks. And I require photos from ground zero. I think it just discourages the arbitrary geocaching. Admin and sources. I'm a fan of including both in the description. Personally, I like to know some admin info about where I'm going to. Park fees, if they're, what the park hours are, whatever. I think it's just helpful. Same with sources. Most geocachers probably won't click on them, but some might. And when I'm logging the EarthCache, it gives me a sense of where you obtained your information. Submission. Most of the time, you're not going to have a time clock ticking, but for vacation caches, you do. Again, 2 months is the standard. Now, if circumstances come up, my recommendation would simply be to reach out to the local reviewer and ask for an extension. Maintenance. Good news is it's an EarthCache, and those require little maintenance compared to physical caches. Yes, I still need to respond to those who find it, but other than that, I'm not overly concerned with maintenance. Now, that being said, I do pay attention to the logs to see if some condition has changed out there at Goosenecks, but the reviewer didn't ask me what my maintenance plan was for a cache that's nearly 1,500 miles away from me. And that's it. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Okay, I did have some rough spots, but I've also written a few. Don't make a vacation cache right out of the gate. Do some closer to home if possible. Again, I've been writing them and teaching the how-to classes for years. Those 2 factors certainly supported this overall effort. Now, my hope is that this video helps tie together all of the stuff I taught in the previous videos. It's easy, in theory, to write an EarthCache, but I think it helps to see how someone else has done it and see the process in action. Maybe you would have done it differently. If so, tell me how by leaving a comment down below. I'm always trying to learn myself. As always, thanks for watching, and if you found this content helpful, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more EarthCache content. If you have questions or some content you'd like to see me make, you can leave them down below in the comments section as well. Or you can also connect with me on Instagram or Facebook. All of the links will be down below in the description. And before I sign off, as excited as I was to put this video together, I'm equally excited to unveil my first EarthCache review coming up in 2 weeks. Only someone like me would be psyched out about reviewing an EarthCache. But the dual goal is to provide some tips and tricks, as well as visit and showcase some EarthCaches for you. With all that being said, in the next video, we're going to go look at some geological potholes out here in Georgia. Hope to see you there. Oh, I wasn't even recording and that was perfect. Oh man.